This is the Well Brewed podcast, where we share our 40 plus years of commercial brewing experience to help our fellow beer lovers on building a brewery. Full disclosure, we do own a brewery equipment business, but we aren't here to sell you anything. This is truly about helping the industry that we love. So g'day, welcome to episode 9 of 10, of the Well Brewed podcast. My name's Lockie, and along with my mates Clemmy and Jake, we're drinking fresh local beer and chatting about building breweries. So in today's episodes, we are discussing crafting your range of beers. But first, what are we drinking, lads?
Well, I just happened to be
Moses.
very, very lucky. I went skiing last weekend and down in Canberra. Actually caught up with Rich and we bought some Red Nut. And oh my God, this is amazing beer. And
do you want to tell us about your new armband from your skiing adventures, Clemmy?
Yeah, I've got a little green armband that extends right down to my chest because I've somehow, being an old man, have torn a pec muscle.
Well, you stacked it, didn't you?
I stacked it. I basically stacked it on day one. Didn't get my shoes sorted, my boots sorted. Was like wobbly as hell, unconfident. Got slushy.
Yeah.
Stacked it.
That's where extreme sports get you. Yep. I get my extreme thrills from this crisp lager from
Find that thrilling, do you? Thanks, Lee.
Thrilling.
Whoa!
I'm drinking Moon Bear.
What a rush.
Dark ale. I've got something that's not hoppy today we normally drink hoppy pale ales, but it's a soft, fuzzy, huggable little session dark ale.
Where's that from?
All right, mate.
Little Bang. Thanks, Oscar.
Little Bang.
And Gang. Yeah. Problem with us all drinking different beers, I'm going to have to tag 3 different breweries in the posts now about the podcast.
All right, we'll get 3 times the reach.
That's right. 3 times the reposts. Although we haven't had 1 repost yet, so maybe we need to...
Come on, Tom.
Yeah,
get us across the line.
You
can be the first one.
You can
Dean.
do it.
Dean.
Dean to do it. Come on, Dean. Sort us out.
I guess the problem is that these guys already have breweries, so they're probably not listening to a podcast about building a brewery.
No, and they don't care about us rambling on, but
they get that enough when we catch up with them for beers.
I know. Anyway, let's should we kick off?
Yeah, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about crafting a range of beers. So I guess from the perspective of starting a brewery, and so how you go about taking an idea of your brew pub or your brewery, whatever you're doing, and putting together, building a range of beers that are going to serve you and your business for the next few years. So I guess like first things first, what is a core range? Like core range of beers? Who wants to take that one?
Core range, my thinking, core range should be as small as possible.
How small? One beer? People have done it with 1 beer.
If you can do it with 1 beer, then do it with 1 beer because that's awesome.
Yeah.
If your core range is 1 beer that you shift more than anything, then fantastic. That's an amazing business model.
Yeah.
So, look, I don't think it should be any more than 4, but I'm sure I'm going to get into punch-ups about that. So, but it needs to have the top few beers that you're going to sell. So it's the beers that you're going to turn over the most. It's the beers your customers come in to drink. And we probably all know vaguely what they look like. But
well, what are the top 2, right? Like there's 2 styles that I've got bouncing around my marble.
Well, I mean, we live in Australia, and even I think the number 1 beer in the world is lager. So
I think it's something like the stat is like 80% of all beer sold in the world is a Pilsner derivative of some description, right?
Well,
it's all lagers. It's like everyone drinks lager. And not and that's beer total, not just craft beer.
Yeah.
But you'll find as much as you may not like it. Lots of breweries sell lots of lager, and it'll become one of your biggest sellers. Full stop.
Absolutely. So you'd be mad not to have a lager.
Mm-hmm.
Probably closely followed by your pale ale.
Mm.
Now, I probably am opening up a can of worms here, but I mean, call it what you
Please
will.
do.
Call it what you will. XPA, pale ale, US pale, session pale,
Aussie Pale.
Aussie pale, classic Aussie pale.
Contemporary Aussie Pale. What do they call it?
Yeah.
New World Aussie Pale
New
now.
World pale. Yeah. They're probably going to be your number 1 and 2.
A hoppy beer under 5.5%.
Yeah. And then after that, it's really potentially customer driven what else you've got in there. There might be a mid strength.
Yeah.
There might be a
Or no or low now.
there might be an old low.
You might hit the nail on the head in a weird and wonderful, and it just take off.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Something unique. Could be something malty. Could be something yeasty. Could be something high ABV. But you reckon 4 is the sweet number?
Oh, look.
Actually, we make our own notes before we jump into this. We don't discuss it too much. I actually had 4-ish was what I'd written down.
4-ish.
Yeah.
4's a healthy number, I think, because it gives your customers a bit of range, but it's not detriment. Like, you don't have to have loads of different styles. It doesn't lock you into, if you have a stout as part of your core range, it doesn't lock you into producing that stout all year round.
But what makes a core range? Hang on. Like, for me, a core range, it's beers that your brewers are producing regularly.
Always available.
They're always available. They're always on tap. You can always guarantee they're in there when you walk into that bar.
Yep.
Those 4 beers, they're always on tap. They're the ones that are going to turn over. They're the ones that are going to generate the most revenue for the business.
Yep.
They're the ones that are going to be the most optimized, cleanest, freshest.
Yep.
Heavily associated with your brand.
Yes.
Yep.
Aligned with your brand.
So what are the negatives of having more than 4 beers in your core range?
Well, let's talk about the fun thing that everyone loves to talk about.
Inventory management.
Control. Who likes to sit on a whole bunch of working capital? No one. Doesn't make any money.
The more core range you have with different ingredients, the more ingredients you have to have readily available.
And the more SKUs, like if you've got your core range in pack, for example, so you've said, all right, the core range is not just keg across the bar, it's available for takeaway in cans.
And growlers, to get tags.
Or growlers. There's another 4 SKUs.
Not only that, how many cans in a run of printed cans at the moment? I think the minimum's like 10,000 from a lot of the suppliers. 60,000.
60,000.
There's some new printed can technology, though, isn't there, that is allowing you to do less and less. I know it was showcased at BrewCon. I can't mention any names, but
we're like the ABC, right? We can't support any commercial enterprise. We just
prefer Triple J. Hey, but look, Seltzer, maybe don't. A low or no or Seltzer.
Yeah.
Could be in your core range as well. Like, so,
yeah, it's cool.
I dropped into a brewery not that long ago, and they said that behind their lager, one of their no low or seltzers was number 2 by volume.
Right, there you go. I would unashamedly say that I love having a seltzer from time to time. I think they're delicious.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Poolside, nursing a hangover, you can't fault it.
Well, I've been getting into my hop waters as well, and some cracking hop waters around. We had one the other week as well.
Yeah, we did.
Good.
The Brewcon, that was killer.
Just to get back onto inventory management a little bit, because we're digressing a fair bit.
Yeah,
I would say, like, one of the powerful things you can do when building a core range is actually create a unique flavor that becomes part of your brand and what your customers would come to expect. Like using common ingredients in recipes allows you to build a flavor profile that people can associate with your brand, which is pretty interesting and done quite well by like some breweries that you can taste this and go, oh, this is a so-and-so brewery lager. Like it's perfect.
Yeah.
And that's really, when you start trying to build a fan base, a lot of people would be looking for that in a way.
Yeah, something they can associate with, identify, latch onto.
Yeah, and from a business point of view, that's powerful for your branding and marketing.
Yeah.
And it's sensible for your inventory management because you don't have to have hop contracts with all these different types of hops that you've got to try and churn through the year and have cold space storage for and have all these different malts. Like I would cross my heart, hope to die that I would recommend to everybody only to have one base malt. Sometimes you see people have loads and it's hard to
manage.
See the benefit.
It's high wastage. It's a pain and you don't make any better beer for it, in my opinion.
Malt doesn't get better with age.
No. We live in Clemmy and I live in an insanely high humid environment.
Not me.
Not you.
Less weevils for you.
But you've had the experience firsthand of what it's like being up in Queensland and trying to maintain stock levels of base malt. And humidity is a killer.
The core range, you are building trust with your customer base. Yep. So if you can create some amazing beers in that core range that your customer base can rely on.
Yeah.
There was some little saying that you said to me that stuck with me, Clemmy. I think up in Hemingway's, it's like you don't really lock in a beer until you've brewed it like 100 times or something.
Do you want to dive into that, Clemmy? I mean, do you want to expand on that?
I'm probably going to offend people's business models where a new beer is something that they do on a weekly basis to keep people interested. But
no, look, I think that's a legitimate thing to do. I don't think it's necessarily
that's
negative.
A point of difference, right? That's another 100%. Point of difference. That's a choice they've made.
Yeah.
For me, really dialing in beers, I don't know whether it's something to do with my scientific and engineering background, but I love optimizing things, right? And Jake, you're the same. Don't compare.
Maybe it comes from all the spare time you had from when you're in the big house.
Yeah, maybe that's where it came from. But if you can spend some time for your core range, you should always be optimizing it. You should always be evaluating it.
Continuous improvement.
But we work with raw materials that are seasonal. So new malt, new hops every season. You're trying to produce a beer that is, quintessentially your brand.
Yeah.
So you need to spend constant time honing and optimizing that so that it remains true to style and true to your brand. And so I would never imagine a recipe should be the same year on year.
Yeah.
No. It needs to be representative of what you initially set out to achieve with the beer style and your brand. So and you need to adjust for raw materials. You need to adjust for all those seasonal changes. You need to make sure that it's being optimized for that process. I've spoke in depth about if you're taking that beer from keg to can, how you're managing the recipe, what's going to happen to it after being 3 months in a can and oxidation occurs and things change. Like, how are you managing those recipes? So for me, a core range is something you're always working and optimizing, but because it is your core range, you get an opportunity to brew it often. And so you have this opportunity to keep working on it, keep getting feedback from your sensory panel, checking it against previous ones that were awesome. So so much work to be done on the core range without even considering other options, the seasonals, etc.
Wicked. All right. So core range is 4-ish beers, in our opinion, can be 10, whatever you like, can be 1, that you brew regularly and are always available and represent your brand. Right.
Yep.
Seasonal range. What's a seasonal range?
I would say seasonal ranges are things that you do that are well planned out to meet events that happen regularly in the calendar.
Okay.
So things that are planned. So your Oktoberfest beer, your Halloween spooky beer, your whatever it is. That
Halloween
pick a theme,
spooky beer.
Pick an event, pick a marketing launch. But you're brewing a beer to fit some seasonal launch, and you may brew it every year.
Oktoberfest.
It's not to say that you can't just brew different beers each time. It's just what I would describe as being your seasonal range would be something that you've got a bit of a strategy into how you're going to launch that into the market.
But it would be a one-off, right? It would be a beer that you don't brew all the time.
Yeah.
This is the creative side of brewing, right? Like, a lot of us get into this gig because a small portion of us, of the engineer and us, is creative as well. And so you want to try something interesting. So this is like brewer's discretion a bit.
Have a bit of a play around. Use new products, new hop products, new malts that have been developed. Use different combinations. Push the boundaries on what a pale ale is.
Make an extra pale.
Make it extra pale. Who knows? Yep. I think where people kind of have to find the balance is how much do you make? How much can you sell? And unless you're collecting data and pushing marketing, if you've got a sizable kit and you make 40 heck of a seasonal beer, you're going to want to move that seasonal beer within the season. Otherwise, it's taking up room in your cool room.
The season could be a month, right? Because you could do 12 a year if that's your jam. So
this is a really good one for you, honestly. Like, you've been in amongst this. Like, what do you see? Do you repeat a seasonal beer? Do you,
if it has a following?
How do you manage these things? Because I mean, like, this is a process, right? Like, putting recipes together, building beers, making them awesome. Even seasonal beers it's not that easy to make them awesome beers. Like, especially if you're barrel aging or doing something like that. Like, tell me how you put together a good outside of the core range beers that capture your audience, that it still plays with your brand, it still builds interest and it builds excitement around the brand. Like, this is something I know you've personally taken very seriously. Like, how do you do that? That's hard.
It's really challenging doing regular seasonal beers or regular one-off beers. I think that I use the terms interchangeably: seasonal, one-off, limited release, whatever. Like, it just means, to me, it's a beer that you would brew typically one time only, or once a year. So there's a couple of different facets to that. Through previous businesses, have been involved with like lots of like rotating ranges of new beers all the time, lots of one-off limited beers. And I think like just from a logistical management perspective, it's really challenging. You've got to do new artwork, new design. You need to come up with a story that goes along with the beer. You need to market it. You need to brand it. You need to have a route to market. Like, there was a lot of things that we used to juggle between, different releases at different times. Sometimes you'd have like multiple every month, and it's a lot of work just at the back end to actually get these beers without even making the beer, just getting them to market and making them differentiated from each other. It's a really big challenge. As far as like making good beers regularly, like, it's really tough because normally you get one shot at it.
So you don't brew this more than once. Like, so you're brewing it like once.
Historically, we've normally just gone straight to the big kit, back ourselves in, go for it, and just lay it down. Like, if it's really weird and wonderful stuff, we would pilot it just to get one stab before we went for it. But normally, we would just go for it on the big kit and just end up with 50 or 100 hec of what we brewed. But we just back ourselves in to do it well, and then that just came through probably naive confidence and experience that led to that we could just back it in. But yeah, it's a challenging thing to do, and to come up with something. So not only coming up with releases regularly, but coming up with releases that your market is going to engage with and want to buy, and give them a reason to keep coming back to your tap room or to the bottle shop to buy your beers, is really tough. You really got to have your finger on the pulse of what the industry is doing. I think you really need to understand what your market wants. And I know I've ranted about this in other episodes, but it's really about your customer. If you're making these seasonal beers because you love to drink German Hefeweizens all the time, it's just not gonna get traction with your audience. You really need to pivot and continue evolving as a brewery to produce new beers that people want to drink. So I think the biggest challenges are around the logistics, around actually coming up with new brands, new exciting something to go along. And it can just be, hazy IPA with Citra, but how do you package that into a brand and a logo and a story that people want to go and buy that beer? Like, you're not reinventing the wheel necessarily, but you are doing something that's slightly different, or a different spin on something that's cool or in vogue at the time, and just continually reiterating and just trying new things and just pushing boundaries. So
can you pre-sell it?
Yeah. So I guess tips I would be is, like pre-selling. It's really important. So having your branding and stuff organized before you brew the beer is really, really important. So you can actually sell beer before you brew it. That's great. That's like killer if you can do that.
Putting some hype to you. You're giving your sales guys like something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing is use your data. Brew less than you'll sell. That creates demand, right? Like, it's the whole thing of scarcity, rarity. It's, from a business perspective, it's kind of hard because you're like, well, I can sell more of this. I should be. But if you can do this every month, brew less than you sell, brew less than you'll sell, and you build this, like, it's like a snowball, and you build this hype. And this, if people want a beer and they can't get it, it's like, we'll never brew that beer again. That's really, really what it's all about. That's how you drive hype.
What about the idea of this, like, it's the, I don't know, I've heard so many different names to call, your seasonal range or your experimental range, but it's a theme around experimental, right? Like it's the sandpit, the different, the different ways around it. Like, can you create a brand around your seasonals, your experimentals, your like? I've seen it done. I've seen it done, and I've seen it done like well. But like, is that a good idea or not?
I think it's a great idea as like a long time beer consumer.
It's only been an hour, man.
This dates back to even before I was in the brewing industry. Like one of Lockie's first successful launches just had me hooked. Like that brand that he built at Ballistic. Do you mind if I mention it?
Oh, it's okay.
Is it Sleep When You're Dead. That was the Ballistics range of limited releases. And that, as a beer nerd / gourmand, that really had me hooked because it was hard to get. I had to be like first in, best dressed to be able to get a 4-pack.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, we haven't brewed those beers. I personally haven't for a couple of years now, but I actually had someone at BrewCon come up to me and talk about Sleep When You're Dead as a brand, and that they, in Melbourne, were, on their bike every 3 months or however we did it, trying to find those beers and get them before they sold out. Like, that was, quite a successful thing, but, I've had successes and failures in that space too. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into the back end of actually like getting that stuff off the ground, and that one was particularly good. We've done other ones that didn't, track as well, through that brewery and others that I've been involved in. So, yes, I guess the answer to your question, Clemmy, is yes, there's value in it, but you need to lean in and do it properly. If you do any of that stuff half-assed, it loses its shine, and it's not as impactful as if you really focus your energies on it. And if that's what you choose to do as a brewery, and you go, this is a thing that we are going to lean into, focus energy on, do it and do it well. People see that. If you do it and you do it half-assed, then you do everything wishy-washy, and it shows.
Yeah, and I think one kind of last point that I guess we probably should mention in this is that you've got to brew beers that your customers are going to like, not that you as a brewer who enjoys smashing 7%, 100 IBU, red IPAs, loves drinking. You need to make beers that have appeal to a broader market.
Or not a broader market, even could be a niche market, but it needs to be
just to a market.
What your customers want, to a market. Yes, 1,000 times yes. You need to... I guess, so great segue, Jake. You need to brew beers that are targeting your audience. Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you. You need to brew beers that are the beers that your customers want to drink. If you brew beers that are the beers that you want to drink and your customers don't, you will not be successful. Like, that's black and white, as simple as it is.
Really? It's that black and white? Or do you say, well... this is a very limited release and I'm only going to be brewing a small amount, and that's what it is?
Yeah, yes, if it services a niche and there is a market of people, even if there's 4 people who will drink that 1 keg of beer, then yes, that's successful in my opinion. But if you're just brewing beers because it's about you and not about your customers, then that's really, you're pushing shit uphill.
You're coming at it from the wrong perspective.
Okay, so what does unsuccessful look like for things that are outside of your core range? Like, I know we've talked about core range. I mean, the podcast is probably about core range. We probably digressed a little bit. But
no, I had a good rant about seasonal.
What does unsuccessful look like, and what should you really be focusing on then? So if you're getting distracted, what does unsuccessful look like with seasonals, and what should you be focusing on with respect to core range and a holistic view of how do you run a brewery and be successful and make money?
I've got a pretty good example of an unsuccessful seasonal launch.
Okay.
You're not going to throw me under the bus again, are you, Jake?
No. Probably going to throw Clemmy. Nah, I know he argued against it. Back in the day, we did a Christmas launch of brewed on our biggest kit of a Hefeweizen.
Oh, yeah.
In pack, in tall cans, which we had. It was a massive maneuver just to reconfigure our canning line to fit the 500ml cans. So that was like 2 weeks of work to assemble it and disassemble it. We also were issued by the governing body at the time to brew, I think 3 or 4 batches of said beer on a huge kit, which we talked them down to 2, in which it was a Christmas launch. We did it all. We got it all in pack, and then we still had stock left over at the next Christmas. So that to me is an unsuccessful seasonal launch.
Bro, I've been there too. I brewed. It was actually in my opinion, one of the best beers I've ever brewed in my career. Was a Oktoberfest lager. It was like a malty, like Munich malt driven 6% fest beer. It was wicked. It was really good. Could not sell it to save our lives. So we ended up rebranding it as like Toasted Munich Lager. Still couldn't sell it. It's one of those things where sometimes you don't pull it off. But I guess in answer to your question, Clemmy, what does unsuccessful look like? I think we've just answered that, right? It's sitting on beer that you can't sell. That's what unsuccessful looks like from a seasonal perspective. And that's the biggest risk. And that's why I always come back to brew less than you can sell. Like it's a good rule to live by. So that's seasonals. So customers want, we've talked about. I think there's a bit of like chat to be had around what fits your brand. Like I think you should be, from your startup phase, really understanding, what your brand is and what beers are going to fit your brand, and actually crafting your range around, what's going to fit. If you're a, dark urban style, brewery, maybe there's certain styles of beer that fit that. If you're a, light and bright, surfy beach coast lifestyle
Forced
brand,
beach minimalism.
Yeah, there's beers that would suit that. There's, if you're, in the middle, in outback Australia, there's, and you're branded around that, there's all these things. Like I think you need to consider what your brand is and then how that fits around the beers that you're brewing. There's also just like something that I'm really passionate about, and is this thing about what you're doing that makes you different. So why would someone buy your pale ale over someone else's pale ale? I always asked myself that question when I was at Ballistic. It's like I say, a pale ale is pretty good. Why would someone buy our pale ale over someone else's? And it's like this thing, and it really just always going over in my head of how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we make ourselves different? What are we doing that's unique? And there's really good examples. I'm sure you guys have got some examples of what breweries are doing that's different, but I think it needs to be a consideration because you need to be different. There's 600-700 breweries in Australia now. There's oodles all over the world doing something in a similar space. How are you going to differentiate yourself?
Is that more about brand engagement than the beers?
Yes and no. It can be both. So, we were talking in the lead up to just recording this episode about, a brewery that brews only lager beers, a brewery that brews only Belgian beers, a brewery that brews only imperial stouts and kettle sours. Like there is a lot of these breweries popping up now, doing these things that differentiate themselves because it's a really crowded market and you need to do something that's going to make you stand out.
So what you're saying is if you've got a core range that has lager, pale ale, and a couple of other standard beers like an IPA and a low, no, or a mid strength.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily successful.
Well, you may be, but that could be due to other things. And just assuming that's your core range, you could be hyper successful if you've got a great venue and a great brand and great marketing, because that's what's going to differentiate you. But if you are just amongst the crowd, or you want to do something a bit more out of the box, a great way to build a brand is to identify with the people within the brand and have a personality coming from the people that are driving behind it. And if you go, well, I'm German, or I love German beers and I had this experience, then you've got a story to tell around German beers and why we make them and why they're special. And then all of a sudden, you have this something unique that no one else is doing because you've created this thing. So I guess there's a lot of ways to cut that.
That's your point of difference.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. And as much as I love German beers, that's not the only way to do it, But we also talked about not having a core range as an option. That's come up in the last 5 or 10 years, starting in the States, where it's we just brew beer. Every week we brew a different beer. That is a totally legitimate business model now.
That would drive me absolutely insane, but because that's just who I am.
No, but it's the same as anything. You still have core ingredients and core recipes. You just tweak them around and
but you rebrand everything all the time, right?
Yeah, just spend more in labels.
Yeah, because we are living in this world now where everyone wants to try just the next new thing.
Yep.
So is the core range dead, or is everyone want to just try the next new thing?
No, I don't think the core range is dead.
I think the world is evolving and the beer scene is evolving, and core range isn't dead if it's done in a unique, tasteful way that's different to what everyone else is doing.
That also optimizes your inventory management.
You couldn't help yourself. Had to throw that in.
Classic.
All right, let's wrap it up.
All right, let's wrap up. Jake's got to go fishing. That's it for episode 9. Is it episode 9? Episode 9 of the Well Brewed podcast.
Yeah.
And as always, if you have ideas, subjects of anything you want us to talk about or questions, please send us questions. We actually might leave it a couple of weeks to do the last episode because we want to do a bit of a Q&A. So please hit us with questions, comments, feedback, positive or negative. We want it all. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Wellbrewed Equipment, or email us podcast at wellbrewed, wellbrewed.com.au. And that's us. It's a wrap.
If we don't get any, then you have to listen to us ramble on about
again and again. We'll just cancel the show if you don't send us bloody questions. Thanks to Little Bang. Thanks to Felons. What did you got, Clemmy? Bent Spoke.
Bent Spoke Red Nut.
Yeah, we do pay for our beers. We don't get them for free. That's not a hint. We want to support the industry. So thanks, everyone. Cheers. We'll see you.
Cheers,
episode
guys.
10.
Cheers.